Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 286. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week, Gail from Communities Digital News, Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hey, everybody. Did you notice we have a fine new logo befitting the show? Looks good there,
Indeed.
Michael. Let me tell you, loving it.
Yeah, we kind of debuted the logo during our last episode. This is episode 286 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Been a while since we've had a show for obvious reasons, which is the reason for the title of the show of this week's episode, due to COVID-19, coronavirus, however you want to call it, the worldwide pandemic now. Um, really, boxing has been rocked to its knees at a standstill. Fights have been canceled, or it's not canceled, postponed, put on the back burner for the time being. Uh, Men's, women's sports, U.S., Europe, Asia, South America, any and all places in between. And was not going to do a show this week, but at the suggestion of Gail, I decided to got to talk about something, right? So decided to bring it back to, this evening. For those who are new to Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, and blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is: when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. If you want to find out any and all information about Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page is the place to go to. p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. That is the link. I see Daniel has also joined us from the Inscriber. You check the top right of the blog page. You'll find links to where to find us all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, links to where to find find the show on all platforms that carry RSS feed. Links to where you can donate. Let donation be the best nation. I know this is tax season. Scrap that. Given the situation right now, I'm not even going to ask for donation because this is hitting everyone hard economically. So I'm not even going to put mention donations right now. Um, but because most of society is on self quarantine, got to stay home. Most governors around, at least those who got sense, have ordered that folks basically stay home unless it's an emergency. For the fitness enthusiast, I am an online coach for Beachbody.com. Um, there is a concurrent 2 week free trial that goes throughout the year. There's also, due to the current situation crisis, there are all kinds of free workout videos and stuff right now on Beachbody On Demand. If you're interested, just hit the fitness exercise link on Pound Pound Box Report blog page. It will take you to my online coaching page, and through there you can check out the 2 week trial if you still want to get into or stay into some shape, uh, get your fitness right, just for your own personal self, own personal being, to remain a sense of normalcy and calm throughout the situation we're going through. Let's get things started. Yeah, I'll go to you first, Gail. COVID-19, not COVID, excuse me, COVID-19. I want to thank everybody who joining us in the live YouTube chat. COVID-19 um, has put its foot in the sport. Uh, last to the point that the last episode was basically null and void because the topics that we talked about a few weeks back, it's irrelevant. Um, from the perspective of not just a boxing fan, but a media member who regularly goes to gyms to check out folks sparring, to interview fighters, and also going to actual events. Uh, your thoughts on this pandemic, how it's affected the sport, how it's put the sport at a standstill.
It's interesting looking back. The very first inkling I had that this was more than just something I was hearing about in the world news, was when at the last minute, almost literally, Top Rank and Bob Arum pulled the plug on the original date for the Jose Ramirez Victor Postol fight in China. And yeah, they really did decide middle of the week of the fight, to the point that Postol and his trainer Freddie Roach were in China. The decision was made when ESPN and their team started saying, I don't know, we want to send 45 people over to this thing. It's not looking good. And they were getting weird about travel internally in China. And that was the first inkling of the whole thing. 3 weeks later, we had Fury Wilder, which went off without a hitch. But then the boxing world started slowly closing, almost like the end of an old movie where Jacob will appreciate this, where you see it fading to black down to a pinpoint in the center of the screen. You felt the boxing world turning black around the edges, getting dark out there, a void starting to close in, to the point of the very last fight, which then ended up being, inexplicably of all things, a showbox card at a tribal casino, which was still able to control whether stage the fight or not, wasn't under a state government's control as a sovereign nation. So decided to hold that one last card in the United States without an audience. We had one last combat sports, though not boxing, event the next day when the UFC staged its last card in Brazil. And who would have thought almost, a month later, pretty much, a little more, a little less, we'd be here knowing that we're easily a couple of months off, in my opinion, of seeing live boxing again. And I do think when we see it, it will once again be without an audience, at least for a little while. And I mean, who knew? Who knew? And we got mics off there, guys, if you want to chime in.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. I was having some technical issues with trying to resolve that with Daniel behind the scenes. My apologies, folks. I'll repeat the question slash comment. Japan, Jacob, was the first country that I saw take serious action regarding this pandemic, suspending the sport into from first in March and then and through April. Other countries, Italy most notably, soon followed, as well as the U.S., England, uh, countries in Mexico, South America, and whatnot. Um, your perspective, your reaction to the effects of this pandemic, how it hurts the sport, uh, from the fighters to the managers and promoters, to the networks, even to the fans. Are you there, Jacob? I'll go to you, Daniel. If you heard my question, Daniel from the Inscriber, I'll send the question to you. Uh, um, your thoughts, your reaction to this pandemic that we're currently dealing with, and how it's impacted the sport, from the fighters in terms of they're not able to display their talents in the ring, to the managers, promoters, and even going to the fans.
Oh, where can we begin? Where can we begin on this? Because we can say that, I mean, even among the four of us, we're feeling it. Right? And we know Jacob's feeling it. I'm hanging on by a thread, and it's one of the things nobody really expected would go this far. Mainly depending upon how different countries reacted, but At the rate that this spread, at the rate that not only that it spread, at the rate where countries were not being involved in that area, and ultimately, sorry, folks, ultimately, what the response to it, it's shocking to say the least. It's shocking to say the least that we are now really at a standstill where you can safely say that most of us, I don't think myself, like myself, I haven't left the house since left the house for more than probably half an hour in the last 2 weeks. And you can imagine what's going to happen with people like fighters and trainers who are so used to a routine, or waking up at a certain hour, go on a run, or hit the bags, get sparring partners, doing drills. Like the impact on them on the fighters, a lot of it depends upon the discipline of the fighters. I don't expect uh, some fighters to balloon up. I could definitely see somebody like there's the worst example to give, but it's a good example. An Adrian Broner to stay in being somewhat shape when this is over. But that's the onus when it comes to the fighters. When it comes to the promoters, the event holders, there's not much you can do as far as holding an event when a lot of the stay-at-home orders, you probably can't even do more meetings than 10 people. Now, let's think about what's going on here with 10 people. On a boxing match, you have to put in 2 people, the fighters, the referee, 3 judges, so that's 6 people just by itself. And we're not even touching upon the people who would be the cornermen or the representative of the athletic commission. So that makes it extremely, extremely difficult to hold an event. I know there's some hope that maybe club fights may return sooner rather than later because of how UFC is handling things. But the reason UFC is handling the way they're doing is because of their business model. Boxing is a completely different business model.
Well,
And
we will talk about that, uh, the contrast between UFC and boxing, their response. I don't even think it's a business model. Let's just say I feel his reaction to this. Continue on, and let me before you continue on, I want to say that going in and out on this, Daniel. That's due to the fact that the live show is being done on YouTube right now, and because of heavy traffic on pandemic, a lot of folks are going to YouTube to do live stuff. Traffic is causing a lot of channels and a lot of live streams to mess up. So I wanted to preface that before you. I want to make that note before you get on, and that's why you may have issues getting on, staying on, Jacob.
Well, that's one of the things under quarantine, unfortunately. We all have to do something and watch something. But going into when it comes to the promoters, I feel you gotta feel bad for the promoters because this is the only way they make money. If you're like a regional person that doesn't have the benefit of a TV deal or a deal with a streaming service, you're dependent upon live crowds to do the fights to generate income in order to show prospective fighters that you're able to put on big events for them. This is all being heard on it, and probably the biggest effect that's going to have it most is overall on the way we probably view the entire sport economically. because this isn't like the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball, where you have a really set schedule. Boxing, for the most part, does not have a set schedule. Like, we have dates that we sometimes expect fights, but depending on the fighters themselves, you may not even get it. You have to remember, Canelo didn't fight recently on Mexican Independence Day weekend. Granted, Tyson Fury stepped in, but
Excuse me, I'm gonna stop you right there, Daniel, because you're fading in and out pretty bad. I'm gonna try to get Jacob into the conversation. You may have to reboot. Again, I want to apologize for folks who are listening to us live, and for folks who may listen to this later on iTunes or Spotify or Google Play Music and whatnot. I'll go to you, Jacob. Your reaction to the sport being rocked to its knees as a society at large due to this pandemic.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not just boxing, it's all sports in general. You know, it's a weird world because, we've all kind of lived with sports in our life, and us being, huge boxing fans, obviously not having something to look forward to on a Thursday or a Tuesday or a Saturday, it's weird. But this is a global thing that's affecting all corners of the earth essentially, and there's just so much unknowns. I know everybody's probably turning into a little bit of Jack Torrance, being cooped up in their house, and when they're we're kind of like birds that are being caged. We weren't meant to live this way, but it's kind of what the experts are saying, is going to hopefully we'll hit that peak of this virus, and we can get through it, and then we can get back to more regular life, and hopefully be able to enjoy boxing or other sports, and some people can get back to their the things that provide their livelihood. I as you guys know, I was affected by it. I was laid off from my job and as a non-essential business, and I'm currently looking for work. And one of the things I had to do was tighten the belt, and so to speak. So like a service like DAZN or Plus, get rid of that, because those are essentials right now. And maybe we'll talk about it later, but I think this is going to have even when things come back to the new normal, I'll call it, because I don't think it's going to be the old normal. You know, depending on where the economy is and where the unemployment is, you might not have a lot of people. Even if they do set up fights, you might not have a lot of people come back because they might not be able to afford it, even at $10 a month or whatever.
It kind of leads right into the question provided on the live YouTube chat. Shout out to official scorecard boxing science for his question. I'm gonna post it up so everybody can read it publicly. The question he asked is, could boxing events without public possibility, excuse me, could boxing events without the possibly go force the promoters to put the set cards on pay-per-view in order to compensate for no gate income? Here's the problem with that. To Jacob's last point about when boxing kind of returns to quote unquote normal, because it's impacted all aspects of society. You just heard Jacob's story, and our thoughts and prayers go to you in hopes that you find work again ASAP. Because people are being laid off, because people have to tighten their belts. When the sport hopefully resumes official, can they afford the prices that they had to pay prior to all this for pay-per-view? You got to keep in mind now, at least stateside here, pay-per-view cards were $50, $60, $70 plus. I don't know if folks will be able to afford that now, given many folks' financial situations that they will be dealing with if this pandemic continues and if folks have and if stay at home orders continue to persist, and if folks continue to get laid off or downsized or forced to work at a lower level than they are now, take less pay, etc. In that, if that's the case, and I'll go to you, Gail, and then you can follow up, Daniel. Will the networks, will the promoters adjust from their end, given the financial hit this is going to take on everybody? Over the prices for pay-per-view numbers, how will the sport react?
I think you're going to have a few different layers going on. First of all, to the last question, pay-per-views, I think it's going to be quite some time before any network tries to stage a pay-per-view. The streaming services are hoping to hang on to their customers right now, hoping that they're sticking with the ESPN Pluses and the DAZNs and so forth. I think a pay-per-view, especially out of the gate fairly quickly, it would be a bad look. I really do. Right now, these guys have got to be concerned with putting product in front of the fans, bringing the fans back, hoping they didn't all disappear, and just breaking even, just giving people an income within their own companies, getting purses back to the fighters. Whether or not we have fans in the seats right away is also to be determined. I really think we're going to see at least a few early fights be conducted with either a very minimal audience or no audience in a studio setting. So if the audience becomes secondary at that point, they just need to get a product in front of the fans. That's step one. Step two, where do you stage the events? When do you bring the audiences back? I think the first few fights will need to be a big enough draw that people who still have an income, who will still spend on fights, who will still travel, will still go to Las Vegas, will still go to New York, will probably still go to Los Angeles. I think the regional fights where it's likely people are more heavily affected will be the ones to lose at first. What's interesting about the cities I just named is 2 out of those 3 have been hit tremendously hard, none harder than the city of New York.
Oh, gosh.
LA is probably a close second. However, the truth is, to this point, Las Vegas has been, in comparison at least, mostly spared. I believe that's where you're going to see fights with audiences take place. I also believe that's where you're going to see fights without audiences take place. Top Rank has a studio. Dana White, UFC has a studio. I'm sure Dana White would be happy to loan out his studio setting to any promoter other than Bob Arum, with whom he has a massive feud. And we also don't know what Dana White's plans are for boxing. If he's going into business with Floyd Mayweather, which has been discussed, maybe that's what we see. But you know what? Entrepreneurs, business people, people in industries used to being creative, they're going to find a way. They're going to get a product in front of us. They're going to get it done. That's what entrepreneurs do. And boxing's a very entrepreneurial sport. What they're going to have to hope, though, is that they've got a few months buildup at least, that they can get started by, let's say maybe late June, early July, getting some of the attractive, perhaps secondary cards put up for us leading into the fall, when the bigger names who require a bigger lead up and longer run up in training get their chance. That's when we're going to see the, Fury Wilder 3, because they've already kicked the can down the road to October. Are we going to see a Canelo Golovkin 3? Well, if we do, I think that heading toward the September, Mexican Independence Day weekend, the clock's already ticking in April for that. It really is. Here's the level of fights we're going to see. I'll bet anything. One of the first fights out of the gate you're going to see is something like Regis Prograis and Maurice Hooker. That's a great fight. That's both guys would be very motivated. The money is right. The action is right. That's a fight that people are interested in. I think that's where we're going to go. Or the other possibility, I think, is you start seeing fights outside the US first. You see Mexico get back in the game. They were last out, one of the last out of the game. There were still cards in Mexico after that Showbox fight. Not very long, but there were a few. You maybe are going to see it in Japan, although what we're seeing now, all of a sudden, they're starting to see the pandemic hit them in a way they didn't expect. So that might change the trajectory. And the truth is, China may have gotten past the worst of it. We might even see fights there. Who knows? Australia, possibility. I don't think we're going to see them in Europe. There's also the possibility that we end up seeing fights made in the Middle East. We already know Eddie Hearn's chomping at the bit. If anyone's going to do it, he's going to be the one. So I'm feeling optimistic. People have tried to put a stake through the heart of boxing for a long time, and it hasn't happened yet. I think we're in a good position to fight back, and I think boxing and combat sports in general are in a far better position than the major American sports leagues. Getting a whole NFL team on the field, that's a hell of a lot harder than getting two boxers in the ring. Hell of a lot harder.
No, from that perspective, absolutely. I'll go to Daniel on this. Hopefully, we got his technical issues fixed. Some comments here in the chat. Official score said that's what he was thinking, but he wasn't thinking about the other side that I mentioned. Bronze Plumber in the chat said, "I pay for pay-per-views, but I'd be more willing to pay right now than pay more right now than normal. Kind of like I'm supporting local takeaways and small shops more than normal." Punch for Pound says that boxing is $1 billion business, but you can't compare it to small shops. LOL. I'll go to you, Daniel. From a financial perspective, my concerns, are they valid? Because it's not just the fact that given people are getting knocked off their feet from this, can they really afford pay-per-views once the sport returns? Will they have the money to travel to these events? I mean, we're talking Vegas. Vegas is not cheap. If people go there for more than just for boxing, you got hotels. A lot of people want to gamble, want to sightsee. The same thing in California, and in New York. It's just so dangerous right now that it's just no way. It's just no way, given how hard the city and the state has been hit.
Yeah. In New York, you could pretty much say that's probably going to be a no-go. It gets bad when the Central Park is already starting to set up temporary sites for mass graves. So that New York is a no-go in that area. Honestly, in that area, because I mentioned in the local shops, and if anything, to me, I probably think the opposite when it comes to Gale. I don't think if you're going to see anything, it's going to be anything like mid-card events. If it's going to come back, to me, it'll first start at the club level, just because those are just less expensive to operate than the big cards, because all the big cards, let's say if we have to wait for so long and to put it in there, they're going to try to recoup some way the cost of losing that much in the gate. And you could probably say pay-per-view, but we kind of already know how the issue is for pay-per-view with the amount of illegal streaming that goes on in fights. If anything, that might illegal streaming, because, like Jacob mentioned, people's wallets are being tightened. You might see more people even be more inclined to stream something illegally if you try to put something on pay-per-view. So, if anything, you have to build it up from the small ends in here to the first. You have to make sure you are completely in the safe area in order to put in a large events. And Gail mentioned Las Vegas is a great example. Las Vegas like shut down their casinos immediately. They started becoming pretty big. They made sure that people got out, so that way their numbers, they're like people infected would probably be low.
You know what, though, Daniel? I'm going to step in. No, they did not. Those casinos ran for a good week, way beyond where most of the main lead states had shut down. Um, my brother, as you know, lives there. Maybe you don't know. My brother lives there. I was asking him, how's the traffic? What's going on? And, are people in the casinos? And actually, a friend of his works for the casino industry on the sort of the technical side of the slot machine business. Oh no, they were running. They were running long past when anyone thought they were. Finally, individual hotel chains started shutting down on their own. The Wynn Hotel Group shut down. MGM shut down. And then finally the city said, oh, well, okay, what the hell? You're all closing. Let's close those casinos. The only thing they closed were the buffets. That's it. You could not serve yourself any food. The restaurants were open. The casinos were open. It's crazy.
That's probably what I thought about. It's probably the hotels more than anything
Yeah.
in that area. But that's the thing to me. And whole it takes so much money to operate those things and to bring them back up, to bring all those employees back from furlough, and not to just to stage something, to stage a card that's worthy of Vegas. It takes a lot. It's not going to be for a while, but I could see the big promoters really going for broke, putting in everything on pay per view for the time being. I could see them doing it. I can't see a mid level promoter do it because I don't think they would be able to recoup whatever they could lose at the gate. Pay per view is an option, but if anything, just because even just be probably just because of how much less it looks like when you see it at $9.99 a month, $14.99 a month, compared to $60 a month or $60 for an event. I could probably see, if anything, streaming services probably get more lined up because people are already hopping on those, and those seem cheaper. Those, but you run into the situation like what Jacob mentioned, like where DAZN it was a luxury, and that's something that has to be tied up. There's no real clear-cut answer to me when it comes to financially how you're going to recoup this because we have to face fact. There's money going to be lost no matter what. No, there's no way to completely recoup what you could have gained this year. It's just not really going to happen. You can do is just salvage what you can.
Indeed. Let's move on to you mentioned and Gail. You mentioned Dana White's name into this conversation, and how he's trying to make his foray into boxing. And you talked about the different reactions to this between MMA and boxing. I'm gonna first bring it to Daniel, and then I'm gonna get you and Jacob into this conversation. Your thoughts on the contrast between boxing and MMA, their reaction, and the subsequent feud between Dana White and one Bob Arum. I will say, Daniel, that I am Team Arum on this one. I think Arum has handled this largely the right way. I don't like how Dana White, uh, given the backdrop he's trying to get into the sport, I don't like how he's essentially trying to rush into things here, trying to rush the action back when none of us really knows what's going to happen moving forward. Uh, this may get me into some trouble here, but his early comments to this, his reaction to this, it smacked of what we saw from our government, U.S. I mean, and how they didn't get a full grasp on this, the seriousness of the situation, and then foolhardily making comments about we need to return at this date and this date, only to when a certain day come, oh no, can't do it. And now all of us, talk about that aspect of it in comparison to Arum, and I will say, call me conspiratorial. I don't think it's an accident that this is the same Dana White talking about rushing things back into action when he's had conversations with our president, who's also foolishly, in my opinion, talked about rushing things back into action and not taking this thing seriously. They boys for a reason, Daniel.
Oh, okay. This is where I started touching into why I'm not surprised that Dana White is going through this way, and it's not because of the politics involved. It's and because of something that I've stated for years when looking at the UFC business model.
Yeah.
The UFC business model, I've stated they have copied the WWE business model of having to put on at least a major event once a month, no matter what. Keep having it put on because then you can schedule it a little bit easier. Well, let's look into the whole area where they're standing at right now, because you mentioned our federal government. You mentioned the person that currently occupies the Oval Office. Well, I think it was 2 or 3 days ago, he had a conference call with all the commissioners of the major sports, Vince McMahon, and Dana White. And because the current occupant of the White House tries to say that they want to have things back together like in August or September, you gotta you have to take that cue. But Dana White has to push that because what you also had this weekend, along with that conference call, you had WWE still running their biggest show of the year. But they had to do it in the way where it had to be pre-taped because of Florida State home order. And they had to stretch it out over 2 nights when they normally try to do that big event, WrestleMania, all in one night. And it becomes so long, it's almost like a shift at work. But that's what they want to build on it. That's what they want to recoup on it, because that's to me the main advantage that boxing has had over the UFC. Boxing doesn't have a set schedule, like I mentioned. So you can move around dates, move around fights where you don't have it set up. Whereas Dana White, unfortunately, he's made it the model. You have to have UFC here. We have to talk about this. Is the man that yesterday he responded to a fake Ariel Helwani account on Twitter because he got faked out by fake Ariel Helwani, who reported that he made a deal with Putin. So one of his best fighters could travel from Russia to the US to hold his next UFC card. That's how paranoid Dana White is. Oh, by the way, he's also the subject of I think a lawsuit where he's actually the person suing. But you have to think about this entire situation when it comes to Dana White. Like, he needs to say what he needs to say because because the UFC has built the business model the way they have. Of course, he's
Later for that, what about the safety of the fighters? That's my point.
Oh no, we're talking about the UFC here. Of course, there's not about anything regarding the safety of the fighters, because it's the same thing. Okay, you still gonna have training camp. You still have to have build into it. What are you gonna do? what are you still gonna do when it comes to health safety of the fighters? Because when I mentioned before, a lot of these stay-at-home orders, if anything, they're not allowing gatherings more than 10 people. Like I said, in just counting the people in the ring and the judges and the representative of the athletic commissions, that's at least 7 or 8 people. We're not even getting to the corners of each one. We're not even getting to, if we're broadcasting this, cameramen, ring announcers. We're not even getting into that area. So logistically, it's going to be a mess to put it in, but they're doing it anyway. They're doing it anyway.
You know,
As fraudulent and as backward assed as the WBA can be, just create for sanctioning fees just for money. If they can have the sense to think about the fighters and hold stuff, period, full stop.
you know, the problem though is there's a couple of problems with this discussion going on. Number one, Dana White's business model and the business model for boxing that preceded him have nothing in common. Zero. Dana White has a monopoly. He is the commissioner and the owner. Those fighters are his employees. Totally different from boxing. He's not a factor as far as I'm concerned. I mean, in sports in general, yes, but he has a dictatorship. So he has to get along with the commissions. Yes, they can shut him down. Yes, they will if he pushes it further out. But he's got a lot more side alleys he can go down. I'm not too concerned about him. For boxing, we're not talking about them starting now when people can't gather now. We're talking about when the tide turns to the point sports can start emerging. Nobody's talking about anything going on before that at this point. When those can emerge, what will be possible? So we're not talking about a universe where we can still only have 10 people together or 50 people together. Although I think once they get up to 50, 60, 100, you know, I know it feels a long time ago, but think about 4 or 5 weeks ago when most places were still allowing gatherings of 200 people. That's doable. That is doable, not with an audience of fans in place, but if you bring the teams in and out, you check temperatures at the door, which every assisted living facility and senior community and hospital is doing right now. They check them at the door. It's doable. You know, it's feasible. And these are businesses and employees and contractors, which are the fighters, and TV networks that need to survive, but they acknowledge it needs to be done safely. There's no reason to open the floodgates and then end up having to shut them all down again. But I do think when it's feasible, let me repeat again for those who aren't listening, when it's feasible, I do believe the first sport out of the gate is likely to be boxing because of the logistics of it, unless it's Dana White. Dana might beat him to off the starting line. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
He will. He's too money hungry.
But you know what? Who isn't right now, Michael? And who can blame them? You know, there are a lot of people financially hurting, and you got to get your bills paid. And you know what? The fighters have to get their bills paid. So with the caveat, as soon as it's safe and logistically feasible, I think that they'll be out of the gate. And, you know, who's to be sorry? The truth is, if you've talked to a lot of the fighters or you see them on social media, they're in a sport where risk-taking is the norm. And a lot of them would say, listen, you know, the clock is not their friend. The clock ticking by is taking away their livelihood, you know, that is a finite period of time in their lives. They'll never get this back. A lot of them would say, listen, the minute it's safe enough for people around us to stage this stuff, I'm in. they take risks anyway. So I think that's where we stand. As long as all the parties agree, the commissions agree. So far, both the California and the Nevada State Athletic Commissions are following this pretty hard. California has shut it down hard because of their circumstances. But I do think the Nevada Commission, they are not staring down quite the high caliber gun barrel that the states of California, New York, and New Jersey are.
Second question. Why does this dude continue to have such beef with Arum?
Because they're competitive. They're competitive people. And they're both based in Las Vegas. So, Vegas is a shockingly small town among the community leadership and, high rollers. It's not a city like New York. It's not even a city like Los Angeles. Hell, it's not even a city like Phoenix or San Diego. Vegas is a fairly small city. And, I think they just bump up and, scrape up against each other. And let's face it, Bob Arum has done everything Dana White would like to do. So he's defensive. And he wants to poke the big man and get to him. And, Bob doesn't like the way he conducts business. And I think Bob should just kick back and indulge in his favorite new habit, and he'd be fine.
I think the opposite. I think that if White is if White was really as confident as he talked, he could find his own lane without trying to poke Arum. Let's face it, Bob Arum is 88 years old. He's not going to be in the sport that much longer. Let Arum do his thing and let him have his thing. There's going to be space for Dana White there's going to be space in a lot of it for Dana White. He can get what he wants done without messing with Arum. He can. He doesn't need to go there with Arum to get things that he wants done long term. Let him be.
Well, think about the targets that he's going. Remember, he's going after Bob Arum. He's not going after Eddie Hearn. One of the reasons that's more of it as it sounds, they can go after somebody like Arum is because it's true. Arum does not have a lot of time left. So it's easier to fight somebody who barring a catastrophe, you are probably going to win out just based on time.
I'd be impressed. It would say something if he go after Heyman or Hearn. Then you showing some guts. Going after an 88-year-old man like that? Come on.
Yeah, think about it though. This is Dana White we're talking about. He's going to pick fights he thinks he can win. He knows he can't beat Hearn, and he knows he can't beat Heyman.
This is Bob Arum we're talking about. Bob Arum, age aside, I mean, toss that out the window. Yeah, maybe the clock's ticking on him on the planet, but he hasn't backed down from a fight since he worked for John F. Kennedy in the 60s, for Pete's sake. I mean, he calls it. He lets it rip. At this point, what does he give a damn what people think about him? It's way too late for that. I mean, he does not care. And he, I believe he last referred to Dana White as a pussy. So I don't think anybody needs to defend old man Bob Arum.
Well, I ain't gonna say. Well, I'm not gonna go there in terms of what he said about Dana, except. Well, no, I'm not going to go there. I see Jacobs in the back. Let's get him into this conversation. Your reaction to the back and forth we've had in terms of this beef between White and Arum, the reaction between UFC and boxing in terms of this pandemic that we're all dealing with.
I mean, I think, of what I was able to hear, Gail talked about it. I mean, the thing is that as different as boxing and MMA are, they are still within like kind of the same realm of combat sports. So there's that competitive side to it. not like you have with a something to the effect of like basketball or baseball or football. Um, and White, he originally was a boxing fan, and then he got into competitive, or he got into MMA, with the help of his friends, the Fertitta brothers, but because they had the money and the capita to purchase the UFC, and I give him a lot of credit for turning this sport into what it is. Back then, when he had other MMA uh, promotions, he was very competitive against them. He wanted to be the only game in town. He wanted of the MMA world. So, him dipping his toes into wanting to dip his toes into boxing and have all these things to say about it, and attacking someone like Bob. I think there's two things that are happening there. One, it's kind of like Daniel said, he's picking a fight against a guy who he's probably going to outlast because of Bob's age, and but Bob is also a prominent figure, in boxing. It's he's done a lot, for boxing, and he has a lot of great top fighters. Arguably, two of the top pound right now. But also, I think like they say, bad press, good press is still press, right? So you get your name out there. If you look at MMA in general, how do they sell their fights? It's always kind of like with this feud, the stare downs and the trash talking and stuff. Boxing does a similar thing, and they build up these these kind of grudges, and people want to see that, because it's in that fight, in that combat world. It drums up like eyeballs, and it drums up interest, and people start talking about it. So I think they strategically know that, they both know this, that if they're words are in other people's mouths, and people are repeating what they're saying, and they're there's this feud out there, then people want to see like, well, what's going to happen. So it's a smart business thing to do. I think that's a subset of that. But Dana White is, he's kind of like a little bit of a spoiled brat. Like, he kind of wants to get his way, like,
and a bully.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, you can, I don't think Bob is being bullied, because he doesn't play the victim. He can give as much as he can take.
No, I'm not saying that
And
he is, but let's just face it. Dana White is a bit of a bully. He always has been.
I mean, that's his nature, is that he just kind of like pushes people's buttons, and says things, and he doesn't act like a maybe like a courteous, normal person. And he should have some respect for Bob for what he's done. But he's to me, he's like a spoiled brat. He's used to getting his way, and when he doesn't, then he has his little tantrums or whatever, or he lashes out. But I do think there's some strategy though behind it, of them being in everybody's frame of thought. That's kind of like, that's what sells. I hate to say it, but bad, even what the news leads with, if it bleeds, it leads, kind of aspect. And I think that this is what's being used here, and a subset.
Comment. I'm a director to you, Jacob, in the your live YouTube chat from Punch for Pound. He says that I'm gonna post it up live here. Pay-per-view is dead, in his opinion. That is, as is boxing. Hasn't been a great, memorable boxing match in years. Even when the show is decent, you can't trust the product that you're watching at all. He went on to say there's simply no integrity left in boxing at most pro or college sports. And now, in his opinion, not worth supporting those sports at all, or listening to a word anyone involved in them has to say. He went on to say some other things. He's thankful for the podcast that folks, I guess, that woke him up to his opinion. I disagree about his opinion about boxing in general being dead. No, it's not. No offense, sir, but no, it's not. But the aspect of pay-per-view, Jacob, you who has spoken for years here on Pound for Pound Box Report, that pay-per-view itself, vis-a-vis the Sweet Science, is a bit of a dying model. Uh, your thoughts on that now, given what we're dealing with?
I think this could potentially be the nail in the pay-per-view coffin. With the creation of streaming and platforms like DAZN and ESPN and whatnot, I understand, it's going to be kind of like a slow death and maybe a quicker death now with this whole coronavirus thing, because I do believe that people aren't as inclined to pay for pay-per-views anymore, and because of the prices have seemed to gone up to go up, but the quality of the card has gone down in some respects. Like, they don't load the card like they typically could have in the past. But it's this whole thing with the economy and just where people are going to be able to spend their extra income. Cable is a luxury. Having a nice car, having to be able to go to the fights, having buying T-shirts, but doing all these things are luxuries. And so, as people's incomes start to disappear, or extra income disappears, then I can't really envision a world where I see people paying for pay-per-views, even if they're cheap, for one potential good fight. Unless maybe they load the card up, maybe you can get, that's probably the best strategy to get as many people as possible to buy the pay-per-view. But I think cable providers are going to lose a lot of subscribers, because even cable, is still, it could be like up to $80 a month, even if you bundle, maybe you're still paying 50, and that's a lot of money to pay per month. So, I think we're going to see a big downturn for that, and they'll have to build up that product. But if they're still doing streaming services like DAZN, where you can get, a Canelo, some of the bigger names in the sport, and get them by paying, the $100 a year, people more inclined to do that as a one-time fee than pay, $70 for HD or something.
Let's move. There's no action out of the ring, but that does not mean that anything to talk about vis-a-vis the sport. There have been discussions, talk and negotiations behind the scenes about as far as bouts and potential fights and whatnot. I'm going to you on this one, Gail. First, before then, I want to on behalf of Pound for Pound Box Report, I want to send our thoughts and prayers and our condolences to Juan Anthony Yarde, who tragically lost both his father and his grandfather due to coronavirus. Again, our thoughts and condolences to the family of Juan Anthony Yarde, who, again, that's really, really tough. And the question is how or if he will be able to recoup or regroup, I should say, following such devastating losses back to back in short period of time. And once again, rest in peace to the father and grandfather of Juan Anthony Yarde. Try to move on from that sad bit of news to kind of some promising stuff that's being talked about outside of the ring. Let's go to the ladies here. Gail, over the weekend, a lot of back and forth between one Claressa Shields and Cecilia Braekhus. Braekhus was taking part of a live IG chat in which she was asked about a possible fight with Cecilia Braekhus, and for her, the reason the fight did not happen was just a simple case of money. When Matchroom DAZN came up with that deal in 2019, she basically just took it because it was a lot of money, and a fight with Claressa Shields just wasn't the money wasn't there. Well, Claressa never wanted to back down or see something and not respond to it. She also went on a live IG chat. I can't remember the guy's name. It's hard to it's not that I can't remember. It's hard to pronounce. Um, Basically, accused Braekhus of lying. She said that a fight with Braekhus would have been guaranteed $1 million. She would have been able to keep all the belts provided they fight at 150-pound catch weight. Also accused Braekhus of ducking, uh, little petty stuff, them blocking each other on Twitter and whatnot. I wrote about this for Three Kings Boxing over on threekingsboxing.com. For me, at the end of the day, I hear all of this and I'm like, okay, is this fight going to happen eventually? I say no. I think, in spite of how much that Claressa Shields wants it, I think that Braekhus, undisputed welterweight champion, she has her eyes on different ladies to fight, namely Katie Taylor. So should Katie Taylor defeat Amanda Serrano when they eventually have their showdown, hopefully, fingers crossed, later on this year. Your thoughts about this back and forth between Shields and Braekhus?
Shields and Braekhus have been going back and forth, just like Shields and Layla Ali have been going back and forth, and Shields and, put your favorite name in here. And, why not? It's just talk. But I'm with you, Michael. I don't think this is really a feasible fight for a couple of good, solid, athletics based reasons. It's just simple reality. Number one, Braekhus is, I believe, 12 or 13 years senior to Shields.
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's 38 and Shields is 25.
25. Yeah, so 13 years. That's that's a pretty big gulf, folks, especially somebody who has been as active on her side of the sport as Braekhus has been. Also, Braekhus is at best a welterweight, at best, and she's a small one at best. Shields, yeah, I give her credit. She stripped herself down to 154. She apparently did it with relative ease. Credit to her and her training and her discipline. She looked great, but if Braekhus is a small 147, Shields is a massive 154, if there's such a thing. That's a big gulf. So between the weight difference, which, you know, catch weight, yeah, I get it. That's still a massive disadvantage for Braekhus, and the ages too. I just do not think this is a realistic fight for her. She's nearing the end of her career. I mean, the clock is just simply ticking. It just waits for no man or woman in the sport of boxing. Let's face it, Katie Taylor is a much easier fight for Braekhus. She's much closer in weight. She has shown vulnerability, and Braekhus wants to go out, with another big name on her list. It'd be a great fight to stage in Europe, nearly anywhere. It would draw huge numbers. You can't say the same for a Shields Braekhus fight. It's certainly not in the United States. It would not draw the same way. I'm not entirely sold that it would draw in Europe the same way a Braekhus Taylor fight would, which means money. So again, all factors we've got to deal with, plus this situation we're in where half the world's on lockdown. Braekhus isn't going to have a lot of time to play with. So I think she's going to play it a little safer, and for a little bigger money. Shields has got a lot of other targets and opportunities out there.
On a side indirect note involving women's boxing, I'm gonna stick to you, Yale. Something that went down during our time off that hasn't got a whole lot of attention. Delphine Pearson, who many people feel arguably defeated Katie Taylor June of last year on the Joshua Ruiz one undercard, lost to a 19-year-old amateur by the name of Dubois fighting, attempting to qualify for the 2020 Olympics. Pearson, junior lightweight champion, undefeated, I believe, gave Katie Taylor, a woman who some believe is the best pound for pound fighter in the world, undisputed lightweight champion, hell. I felt she beat her. A lot of other people feel the same. Yet she loses to a 19-year-old in the amateurs. The level of surprise.
Huge, with a capital Huge. Nobody expected that. That's what boxing is about. We do see these upsets from time to time. It's hard to say whether Persoon took a drubbing, in that fight. And I agree with you. I believe she won the fight. I didn't even think it was that close. I thought she won the fight. Taylor got a gift in that one. Be that as it may, it was a rough fight. And
sorry, excuse me for interrupting. Got the name wrong. Her name was Peta, Nicolette Peta, I think his name is. I'm in a qualifying tournament in London. My apologies, Gil.
Yeah, in fact, right before the sport shut down, the qualifying tournament took place. In fact, it didn't entirely finish. That's another story. So, yeah, was Pearson feeling the effects more than she realized? And did she overlook her opponent? That is the classic mistake in boxing. You think you're just going to have an easy ride, no big deal. Yeah, I don't really have to worry about that. Oh, that is the time you better start worrying and you better look at yourself in the mirror. The old cliche that we hear so often, well, I'm not overlooking my opponent. People say that for a reason. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if in her heart of hearts, Persoon would say to you, yeah, I thought I was going to roll over her. And, especially based on my last fight, I was looking good. And whoops. Yeah, that's a stunner. And I'm sure it was, credit to her opponent for bringing the fight and winning, but I'm sure Pearson was a big contributor to what happened to herself.
Yeah, whoops, whelp, what the hell, however you want to call it. This is that is one of the biggest surprises of this early 2020. Going to some other boxing news, I'm going to start the conversation off with Daniel. Before the sport has been put to a halt, there was talk of a rematch between uh, Juan, Juan Francisco Estrada and Roman Gonzalez. Gonzalez stopped Calify in January to win a WBA belt at junior bantamweight. Um, Early negotiations were starting. Gail sent me the story. Um, Part of the deal is that Estrada is asking for a lot of. I've looked it up. At least, let's just say a lot of money. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to get into the exacts, but your thoughts on negotiations for that rematch happening, and as well as Estrada. Uh, if he wants Estrada basically saying if he gets the rematch, he wants to get paid and paid a lot. I personally don't blame him. My thing is, look, when Roman Gonzalez was on top and Estrada was down at flyweight wanting a rematch, one of Gonzalez's things was he wanted to get paid $1 million for a rematch. If Estrada he wants to get paid similarly to fight him now that he's the dude on top, I'm not mad at him for doing it. Turnabout's fair play, in my opinion.
It's not even that when it comes to the money. It's also the fact that you can make an argument that Gallo won the first fight between them. So there's that incentive that you fall into it. I'm not really surprised that money is going to be the driving cost, but the main thing is with Chocolatito, even though like you beat Estrada, like I said, there's an argument that can be made, and people have made it that you really actually lost the fight, and maybe that you have been ducking Gallo for that reason. So let it build up, let it fester into it. We all have a lot of time now on our hands, so it should get in there. And this is, like I said, this is one of those fights to where it probably needs to not happen in the U.S. This has to be Mexico, and in order to build it up to make it. But this is one of those fights where you have to build it up. It has to be one of the major cards into it.
Jacob, Gail, your thoughts on the at least early negotiations happening for a rematch between Gallo and Chocolatito?
I'd say I'm excited for it. I'm still under the mindset that Roman wasn't. He just got beat by a big guy, and they had a lot of punching power. And I still think this is an excellent fight, and it's a way for Estrada to potentially get revenge and ascend to the top. He's pretty much at the top right now, but this would be a little kind of sprinkles to the sundae that he has currently. And you still have Rungvisai in the mix, too. They can always do a third fight if he beats Gonzalez, but Gonzalez being Yafai, who and now has a belt, and I think this, the stakes are high, so it's a perfect type of fight. We know there's going to be action, we know there's going to be motivation, and like I said, the belt's on the line, the stakes are high, so it's the perfect kind of fight.
I don't know if you
Your
can.
thoughts, Gail?
I don't know if you can hear that sound by my microphone. That's hands rubbing together in sheer glee for this fight. This is the kind of fight I want to see. I'm one of these folks, as many of us are here on the Pound for Pound Report, Boxing Report, who love the smaller weight divisions for the action, for the power per pound that you see out there. Estrada has, had a chip on his shoulder over losing to Roman. He wants revenge. We didn't really think that it'd ever come to pass, given the trajectory of Chocolatito's career, until all of a sudden the old Chocolatito showed up here a few months ago, and now it's an absolutely feasible.
Oh, Chocolatito, or did he just fight a vulnerable guy who fought a stupid fight?
No, because Chocolatito really looked like the old Chocolatito, and the right things have been put in place around him that had fallen apart, which was a lot of the problem with him, in addition to some injuries and other issues. But, Gonzalez is a very emotional guy. He's a very religious man. He was very devoted to his longtime trainer who had passed away, and it was devastating to him. I mean, that's the foundation of your career, the thing that gives you confidence and comfort taken away from him. But he's found the right chemistry with his new trainer. His injuries have healed. He was off the scene and kind of got his head right, got his heart right, got his training right. I think it's the real deal. I mean, maybe I'll be fooled. Maybe Estrada will absolutely pick him apart, but fine. Let's see it. Let's see it. And they do both deserve to get paid. I do think, given all that we've discussed tonight, it's not going to happen right away, but wouldn't this be a great late summer fight? And they both deserve decent paydays. Gonzalez broke the $1 million purse barrier for small weight divisions in the United States, set by one of the greats, Michael Carvajal, who first did it. I think that's fair to make sure that Estrada and Gonzalez get paid at least that much. They probably will need, for some fans, a strong co-main and support. But damn, put that fight in LA and get out of Jacob's way, get out of my way. We will be there.
Hey, they better get paid. That's all I'm going to say. Look. When Srisakat and Estrada fought their rematch last year, February, their combined purses was less than Jesse Vargas. Jesse Vargas earned $1.5 million for to look ordinary, and yet those and that was more than what Sri Sakat and Estrada may combine. So they better get paid if they're going to fight a rematch.
Yeah,
Well, I'm raising hell.
is that ridiculous? I mean, think about that for a minute, folks. That's an insult to their talent. Estrada and Gonzalez are both headed to the Hall of Fame, if you ask me, and they damn well should be in there. They have still got plenty to offer. You know, they are hitting near the end of their career. I mean, the timing just could be better. They're in the perfect position to do it. If it wasn't for just this damn situation, this fight would be on the books, in my opinion.
One more issue to talk about. I'm going to you, Jacob. Do you know who this break may hurt the most, Jacob?
Fury?
No.
I don't know.
I'll tell you.
Suspense is killing me.
I'll tell you. Marcos Maidana.
No!
That's right. That's right. Marcos Maidana, whose video and pictures have surfaced. He talked about having a comeback last year. He put it on the shelf. And before this situation, there's pictures and videos. He just didn't talk. It wasn't just him talking to talk. It looked like he was actually in shape. Do you think he's serious that once we get returned back to norm, the level of anticipation for the return of Chino Maidana?
The problem is, like most things, is that he was a great fighter. I like the guy a lot, but training and getting in shape is not the same as being active and fighting. It just isn't. So I'm glad he's been able to take off the weight. I hope he's been smart about his money and doesn't have to do this, because what we always talk about is these boxers, leave the sport, and then they, because they have, I don't know if it's boredom. There's so many different things, they don't have any other skills. They, it's just all they know. They end up coming back, and you hate to see it, because time and time again, these guys have come back after retirement and they don't look the same, and they're getting beat by lower level guys, and it just becomes an embarrassing stamp on their legacy. And we've seen it happen so many different times. But I don't know his situation. I don't know if that he has the desire to come back, like that's what he wants to do. I don't know if it's a money situation. I don't know what kind of opponent he thinks he's going to get. Because of his status when he retired, does he, get a couple warm-up fights and get a shot at a belt? Those are questions that I'm going to have, but, I hope he doesn't do it, because once you retire, I believe you should stay retired. There's fighters that are fighting today currently that I think should retire. Even though, someone like Manny Pacquiao, who I think should retire, even though he has a belt and he has some good wins, I just don't think he has anything else to prove. And it is a dangerous sport, and we've had some recent tragedies and whatnot. And so you just don't want to see somebody suffer the long-term effects if they were to come back, get beat a few times and then not be able to really enjoy their life.
Look, Daniel. If Gail's boyfriend, Chavez Jr., can post videos from home, of himself working out and talking about him returning to the ring, why can't I find some excitement about Maidana actually hitting the pads, hitting the heavy bag, lathered up in a good sweat, looked like he's under 170 pounds for the first time in 5 years?
This is probably the fitness coach in you talking, Mike. You're loving seeing people get in shape, but there's a key difference on it. Chavez Jr. has a record of him doing this again and again, and then him just fucking up again and again. Marcos Maidana, to his credit, does not. He retired. He started enjoying it, but he probably saw the Manny situation. And let's say there is probably a bit of national pride going into this because he probably saw what Manny did to Matisse and said, "Okay, let me have a crack at it." And if this is actually can be sustained, and he can actually go into it, I'll see it in for one night. But you have to do tune-up fights. Like you have to do, you can't have him jumped immediately into the deep end of the pool because there's some things you just can't shake off just by working out, just by training. When you actually step your foot in an actual fight, that's when you start getting a lot of the rough stuff. You can't go to a top level at that time. But good on him because we were worried about him for a bit. He was getting pretty big. And to see him slimming down and getting himself into shape, at least that's good. That's good for him. And it just depends on what they do. We know he was in the PBC camp, and he probably, like I said, he's probably eyeing the Manny fight. Let's be honest. Since Manny's now with Heyman, it's easier to make now than when obviously when Manny was with Arum.
Read some questions here in the chat before we go to one last topic. Bronze Plumber says in the chat, live YouTube chat, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Bronze Plumber, official scorecard, punch for pound. Plumber says maybe this break will force promoters to actually make the fights that they've marinated, but ... maybe not. Official scorecard says he can't wait to see it in terms of rematch between Chocolatito and Estrada. He says Chocolatito getting older body-wise, but body-wise he looks better at 115 now than he did when he first moved up in weight. He also asks, wasn't Maidana coming back just for a charity bout against our Argentinian kickboxer, or is he really coming back? The way I've seen it in the gym and stills and videos, I think he may be coming back for a real quote unquote bout. How long this comeback will last, who knows? But I think he's actually halfway serious. I mean, how far would he go? Who knows?
Only serious. I do think that originally he was agreeing to do the charity fight. Then he started thinking, if I'm going to put in all this work, what the hell? And then his attention was to have some actual sanctioned fights in Argentina, I think, to test the waters, see where he was. But looking at the video, I think he's probably well under 160 looking at him. I don't know if he can make 147 anymore, but maybe he makes 154. Now, wouldn't that be interesting, everybody? You know what? Say what you will about him. First of all, I don't think he needs the money. He took that Floyd money down to Argentina, and it goes a long way there. He bought himself a nice rancho, and he's been living the good life. He's working as a promoter. He backs up his brother Fabian, who's still very active, who's much younger than he is. So I don't think he needs the money at all. I think he decided, I think I could do this stuff. And why does anybody want to get back into the ring? They miss it. They miss it. They miss the adrenaline. They miss the attention. And if he looks that good, you know what? I'm all in on El Chino. I am in. Call me wildly optimistic about this, but I was impressed. I never thought in a million years he'd be motivated to drop that weight, but he did it. He looks good. I know he's not going to be a 140 or 147. I don't think anymore. Although he got this far, Who knows? Give him
Look, man, he's
yeah.
laid off the Argentinian beef. He's eating fresh foods. He's eating his vegetables.
Yep.
He's
He's
drinking his
laid
protein
off
shake.
the car in the
He's
red
ready to come. He's ready to come back. Damn it, he's
hell
ready
yeah.
to come back.
But
Right.
he was getting chin checked. He was getting chin checked at 147. So if he goes to 160, I don't know. That seems like a dangerous move.
You know, truly looking at him, I mean, maybe I'm a bad judge of looking at weight, but you know, remembering him when he was active, you know, I think he could make 154 if he doesn't look like he's that far. 160, I think that would be, I think that would be a problem. I do. I don't think he's not big enough to fight at 160. He has to be serious enough to bring it down at least a little bit closer to, you know, what
Ooh.
active weight was. We'll see.
But you could agree though that training and getting weight down is different than being active boxer, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Look at a guy like Brandon Rios, who used to absolutely blow up in between fights. And his training camps were just like The Biggest Loser. He wasn't training for the ring. He was just trying to get the damn weight off. And it showed when he went in the ring. He was completely unprepared.
Spur of the moment topic, folks. I didn't think of this until now. Canelo. At the time of the stoppage and whatever, and his fight, his May date was postponed. He had no official opponent. Word talk, there was a strong word that he was going to fight Billy Joe Saunders. Now that Saunders has been suspended by the BBC for that just stuck on stupid, ignorant video, he just needed butt whoop for that video that he posted. And claiming I didn't mean it, and shout out to Claressa Shields for her clapback response.
They should let
dudes,
Claressa
if you get
Shields
mad,
kick his butt.
I mean, dudes, if you get mad at me for, and as an aside, for men out there, if the first reaction to Claressa Shields' video was, "Well, do you think she could be suspended too?" Y'all missing the point. Missing the point completely. Stop it. But yeah, now that Billy Joe Saunders is suspended by the British Board Boxing Commissions, when Canelo fights again, returns to the ring, and anybody can respond to this, who will his opponent be?
Well, the way things are shaping up, they can just go straight to the Golovkin fight. It's a logical fight to make right now. This, even though most of us have not really clamored for it, we can accept it though, at least in this one. And that's probably where they're going to move because, well, Billy Ho was just being Billy Ho. You kind of expected him to fuck up one way or another when it came to this.
He can't help himself.
Yeah. It's just not. And then we have to picture a lot of the other pieces that are around the area, the periphery, 160, 168. Most of them are going to be right now still with Heyman. You could probably try to, or you could fight Andrade. But Andrade's in the same boat as Billy Ho. I expect him to fuck up somewhere or another, unfortunately. And not just because of his personal behavior, just because of his business decisions. So Golovkin seems to be the one that's easiest to make. You already have the built-in animosity. You know that once this fight is done, like they're not going to see each other again. So you might as well do it. The timing is going to get there, and you can't be accused in a situation of, oh, you're just stretching out an old, like Jacob mentioned when it comes to Golovkin, you're stretching out an old man. You know, he's getting weaker. Right now, the circumstances dictate that everybody's time is being stretched out. Because we have to remember, even though Canelo, age-wise, seems to be like a young man, he spent half his life as a professional boxer. That's still a lot of wear and tear in the body.
I'll go to you, Jacob, in the private chat. You mentioned will be Canelo, Triple G Canelo 3 as the most viable fight coming up. I hear you, and you're probably right. the problem is, okay, to the average mainstream observer, they'd be like, cool, they fought 2 fights before, they were very good fights and whatnot. My thing is, do we really want to see it again? Because for me, it's going to be the same fight and the same predictable result. Only difference is that Triple G is going to get, he's older. You there, Jacob? I'll send the question to you then, Gail, if you're there.
I'm kind of done with this. I was never one to watch movies over and over again either. I don't think there's a lot to offer the fans in this fight. However, I think we're going to get it whether we really, really want it or not. It will sell. It will put fans in the seats. The question is going to be the timing. The clock is nobody's friend ever in boxing. And right now, it's just spinning out of control. And the longer Golovkin waits, the harder it's going to be for him. If they cannot get this fight scheduled this fall, then I'd have some serious doubts. I don't know how wedded Canelo and Golden Boy are to that magical Mexican Independence Day weekend. And if they are not, and they can push it back a little further, fine. Now, maybe both guys want a tune-up. Canelo may even want a tune-up. Who knows? In that case, Golovkin can go forward with the mandatory that he was going to fight until this.
I mean, given Triple G's age and how he looked in his last fight. Yeah.
Well, and the big question is, there's a lot of discussion about the fact he was ill. So, of course, now, we should all be looking back saying, ill with what? What the hell was he ill with? He was breathing awfully hard. I'm just saying. I mean, there are a lot of people looking back at illnesses they had in the, early part of the year, wondering, I don't know. So, I'm just not certain. I think outside forces are going to make this fight happen if all other things were equal, maybe everybody would have been moved on. But you know what? There's just too much money for people to leave it the hell alone.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
So I think the people that want to see this fight, the Triple G fight, versus Canelo 3, are Canelo fans, because the signs lead to Canelo possibly stopping Triple G. Because Triple G is not only coming off a bad performance, he's not only coming off being a lot older and worn, he's also coming off an injury, which wasn't typically his MO before. He used to fight 4 times a year and pretty consistently and was very active. But he's just not the same fighter anymore. And the other thing that I'm curious about is, do we know it's going to be at 160? Because Canelo's coming down from light heavyweight, and he is a bigger guy, and he has that super middleweight title. I know he dropped the light heavyweight belt, but as far as who he could fight next, possibly they make that Smith fight at super middleweight, and I think that it'll be a bad strategy to go, after all this coronavirus thing, to go into a Canelo Triple G3 thinking that there's going to be a bunch of money there, because if let's say, they do it in September, but we're still on the tail end of this, is it going to be in front of a crowd? Are people going to go? Are people going to pay to those type of prices? Are people going to pay for the streaming service? I think there's still a lot of questions, and kind of like how Gail spoke on earlier, on what, how boxing is going to ease back into building that fan base again. Because there might be people that are also don't want to go into crowds anymore. Maybe they have somebody that's been affected by the virus and got it, and maybe they haven't, it hasn't curbed or hasn't hit its peak. because I do think that the world is going to have to make an educated risk at some point, because the global economy can't keep on going the way it's going, where businesses aren't able to, there's no consumers out there and they're not able to sell product. I just think at some point they're going to have to make a decision and say, okay, you're going to take the risk of going to crowds or going out into the public, to make sure that this doesn't turn into another Great Depression. And, there's going to be a lot of fans that are probably not going to want to go to this event. So if they kick off a Triple G3, I don't think it's going to do the numbers that they want it to do. It was a big money fight before this whole situation, but I don't know that so much now if it is.
And for those, I should mention, for those who may not be aware of what Billy Joe did, he posted a video in which he was, I guess, in some home gym, and he was talking about the virus. And again, this was just stupid on his part, misogynistic to the core, and troublesome, to say the least. He basically suggested that if during this pandemic and for folks staying home, if a woman gets quote unquote mouthy, what do you do to her? That's problematic enough. The fact that he wouldn't ask that aloud or anything else, and he was standing there with the heavy bag punching on it, and he asked that question, and then his next action was to punch the bag, and basically said that if a woman gets quote unquote mouthy during this time, if she's to step to you, you punch her in the face. And he kept hitting the bag over and over and over again. Shields, in response, in a little area, said if you're dealing with a man who's abusive to him, what do you do? And she basically said, you hit him in the balls. You don't go for the penis, you hit him in the balls. Uh, in response to to a man being abusive to you. And some men, not all, but some, their first response was, well, if Billy Joe Saunders got suspended for his video, should Shields get suspended for her video? No, because Billy Joe's was response to someone getting mouthy and stepping to her. That was what Billy Joe did, and Shields was response to someone being abusive. For folks to try to compare the two in that regard, is just stuck on stupid. And again, you miss the point. You completely missed the point.
Yeah, it's defense versus abuse.
Right.
Self-defense is different than, if somebody's is coming to you and you're, doing, because they teach those kind of tactics in self-defense class, like for women and stuff like that, like where to hit, whether it's gouging the eyes or, hitting in the private area and things like that. But, what he was doing was basically saying, if somebody's getting mouthy, a woman's getting mouthy, that it's okay to hit that person. And that's just, that's abuse. That's basically, whether you want to call it domestic abuse or a felon, whatever, it's not the same thing.
Yeah. So I just want to, inform folks who do not know, who are unaware of the situation regarding Billy Joe Saunders, and I just wanted to kind of nip in the bud folks who tried to make the comparison between Saunders and video and Shields video as if it's the same thing, and it's just simply not.
I gotta say something. What is up with the UK lately? Between this and Khan trying to say that the virus spreading has something to do with rolling out 5G.
Yeah. Teddy Riley said the same thing, Daniel. Teddy Riley said
Teddy
the
Riley
same
on
thing.
the point that he's old.
So yeah, the conspiracy theories are just running abound right now. So yeah, I try to stay away from that because I'm not getting that in that. No, 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 no. One last subject here before we start to shut things down. When I was kind of facetiously asking who is going to be impacted most by this virus, one of the names that Jacob said was Tyson Fury. I'm going to you on this one, Gail. Before boxing took action in reaction to this pandemic, it was basically set that a third fight between Fury and Wilder was going to happen in July. As a result of this current crisis, is being pushed back to at least October. Uh, when we were doing the show regularly, one of my concerns was is that Wilder was accepting this rematch too quickly and having this third fight too quickly in a strange twist because the fight was postponed, because the sport is being frozen, if you will, for lack of a better word. Could this actually help Wilder in terms of an eventual third fight with Fury?
I think so. I do. I think the longer that he's got right now to readjust his thinking, figure out what he needs to work on, get to work on it, and the sting and the frankly the humiliation of the beatdown recedes into the past for him. Um, I think it benefits him a lot more than rushing into the rematch. On the other hand, on the other side of the coin, Fury has said many times that being out of the ring is not good for him. He needs to stay busy because it keeps his demons at bay. All the demons he's been very honest about, his mental health issues, his addiction issues. A guy like Fury right now, this is no bueno for him at all. I hope the people around him are watching him, are supporting him, because he could get in a bad way very, very fast in isolation. I hope his wife and his kids, are helping him stay focused. But not only does Wilder benefit from a little more time and distance from the loss, Fury doesn't benefit from waiting it out. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays in. Should this proposed October date still come to pass? And that's still unknown.
Before I go to Jacob and Daniel to talk about the issue of Fury Wilder trilogy, we spent heavy time talking about Billy Joe Saunders and him, excuse me for saying this, fucking up again in the worst way. Given that what he did uh, and Shields' response is basically centered. As a woman, I want to give you the opportunity to react, give your opinion about that whole deal, what Saunders did, as well as Claressa Shields' response.
Unfortunately, I've seen similar things come out of the mouths of a whole lot of men over the years, and they get called out for it now far more than they used to. And the inevitable reaction is, "Oh, I was just kidding. Oh, I didn't mean it. Oh, I'm sorry you took it that way. It was just a joke. Come on, can't you take a joke?" Which is the classic refuge of a bully to begin with. And women in the position of someone like Shields, who can't speak her mind in a strong way and doesn't face any threat for it, more and more feel the responsibility to step out front and say what a lot of other women still can't say. So the dynamics do not surprise me. Shields, though, for stepping up, pleases me no end. And, good for Billy Joe getting suspended. My hat's off to the British Board of Boxing Control for taking it seriously. When guys fight for a living, they of all people should respect the difference between professional fights between two equals, in theory, versus the kind of nonsense, the offensive attitude that Billy Joe was talking about. There's no place in a civilized society for it.
And I thank you for your commentary. Again, I just wouldn't feel right giving us dudes just talking about this and not having at least given you the opportunity, the space to give your opinion about this. Going back to the situation of Fury Wilder 3, Jacob, long term, does this help Wilder, give him more time to recover? And to Gail's point, a long time, does this hurt one Tyson Fury when they eventually fight?
Yeah, that's why I basically said Fury's name, because I do think, I think everybody was, on the kind of the same wavelength that, Wilder getting right back in there. Um, I didn't blame him for doing it, but, it definitely will help him in the long run to, like Gail said, sharpen his skills or sharpen his deficiencies, because he has plenty. He's kind of a one-trick pony, and that one trick didn't get him out of this last fight. He got his own medicine first, by getting hurt first. But it gives him more time to prepare and to work on those things, and to, if he is going to change trainers or whatnot, to, build up that rapport. And then with Tyson Fury, like Gail said, because, we all know, you being an addict or suffering from depression or whatever, once even if you kick addiction, you're always, they say you're always an addict. You'll fill that void somehow with something. And it's you take it day by day, like every day is a struggle to not go back to your old ways. So if he has those temptations there, and which I'm sure there is, constantly, because I'm sure somebody wants to, have a drink with him or wants a party with him. And, if he's in Vegas or whatever, there's temptations around every corner. But, if you're not filling that hole with something positive, then, those things can, kind of eat away at you. There's been many cases of athletes in all types of sports that, have had problems, and it basically will eventually tear them down. Like I point to like a recent 30 for 30. They talked about Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden, two young, talented players who got caught up in drugs, and just, it basically ruined their careers. And, and they still struggle with it to this day. But so, again, I think that's why I brought his name up. I think he's not going to benefit from the time, and Wilder should benefit from the time.
Quick follow-up question before I go to Daniel. Your thoughts on the fact that George Foreman reached out to Wilder and gave some advice to him. If anybody knows what Deontay Wilder is going through, it would be one George Foreman, who basically had a similar track pre Ali Rumble in the Jungle in 1974. He's blowing guys over. People think he was just knockout machine who couldn't be stopped. And then he runs into the veteran Ali, who played rope-a-dope, and he did what he did. Summarily, Wilder, who's bomb squad and talking about he wanted a body and do all this, he runs into Fury. The second fight, very similar things transpired from a mental standpoint. So your reaction to
Yeah, I think it's a very similar, although I do think that George Foreman had more skill than Wilder. But he was in his prime, he was a ferocious, scary man. When he took Frazier out, I mean, he demolished him, and Frazier was, a tough guy, and, I think it's good, hopefully, Wilder listens to, advice from people that have been there, that have gone to their lowest points, and climb that mountain, because that's what he gives me the impression he wants to do. What I do like about his attitude is that he doesn't feel like defeated in the sense that, I'm not going to get back to the top again. Like, hey, I fall. A lot of people fall. It's happened, but I'm going to get back to the top again. I believe in myself. And so I think that's encouraging that someone like Foreman, who, became the oldest champion, after his knockout of Moore, it was just an incredible achievement for him. And, to maybe kind of sidestep that a little bit, Foreman went from this kind of ferocious personality to this kind of fun-loving, happy guy, which was was like night and day from his old persona. And so maybe this will also help Wilder kind of sand those edges a little bit, and not have him be so talking about killing, body people and killing people and stuff like that, and have a little bit more respect for the sport and their opponents. Hopefully that kind of rubs off on him too.
I'll go to you, Daniel. We can kind of wrap things up on this note. Strange twist. Will this layoff, will this postponement help Wilder and hurt Fury long term when these two get back in the ring for a third time?
It does help Wilder in the sense of the fact that he can recover more from the injuries that he sustained in that Fury fight. He has a lot more time to cover it and a little bit more time to prepare. The one thing that finds it dangerous for Fury, though, is that, you have to keep Fury busy. And we know there's another ring he can actually step into that's not a boxing ring that'll happily have him. And today it looks like some of those seats have already been sown, because I actually saw this unboxing scene just now. That today on ESPN they did like a little interviews with the WWE people. One of them is a guy from Scotland who goes by the name of Drew McIntyre. And he flat out said, I heard Fury's talking crap about me. We can go in for the WWE title anytime he wants. And apparently, in that same, after this segment, Fury showed up and said, I accept the challenge. So there's also the danger that he may step into a ring where, even though they're not training into an area, even though it's going to be controlled, he would have to go to Florida, because right now WWE's filming out of their training facility.
I wouldn't do it if it was in Florida. I wouldn't.
But that's the thing. You're risking it because of that. And if it's a situation where Fury has to keep himself busy in order for his demons not to pop up, he may not have a choice mentally.
Not even that. We spit the crux of this conversation of the show has been around COVID-19. The next state that's going to really hit hard by it is probably Florida.
It's between Florida and Georgia. With Florida is because we had to be blunt, we had a bunch of dumbass kids who decided that they were not going to let their spring break be stopped because of a pandemic. And it was getting to the point where some of the gangs, depending where you lived at, and especially like in Miami, South Florida, they were going to get ready to do what's happening in Brazil. In Brazil right now, the gangs are the police, and the gangs are actually enforcing the stay-at-home thing. Like, no, you are staying home. We will pick up what you need to pick up.
Yeah, and that coupled with the slow reaction of the state government there, I wouldn't do it if I was Fury. I wouldn't go to Florida for that.
That's the thing. That's where they would film it at, but it gives him more time to do things like this. That's the thing about it. And there's always the risk that you may not get injured in the boxing ring, but you can get injured in a WWE ring. And that can delay things even further. So it's telling a little bit. It's probably a blessing in disguise for Wilder because, like I say, he can fully recover, but we won't really know what actually is also going to happen. We may actually see the Tyson Fury that was getting ready for the NFL draft once again. That could happen too.
Yeah. And I think we're going to end things on that note. Uh, as I said to begin the show, I really wasn't planning on doing the show, but at the suggestion of Gail from Community Digital News, I decided to do a show this evening. And I am glad that I did so. I want to thank everybody who joined us in the live YouTube chat, Bronze Plumber, official scorecard, Punch for Pound. Thank you for your comments and your questions. Even if I didn't agree with all of the comments, this will be a space where, unless you just say something completely foolish and dumb or insulting, I'll let you have your say at it. If I disagree, I'll just say I respectfully disagree and keep it moving. I'm going to go around the pound here. We always begin the show starting with ladies first when she's here, and we always end the show with ladies first if she's here. Gail from Community Digital News. For those who want to talk media, for those who want to talk small business, let the folks know where they can find you.
Michael, I got to just stop you for a second. Wait a minute. When did we prohibit ignorant speech on this show? Because we've all been guilty of it on the panel. Starting to worry now about my qualifications. The good news is we all hold each other to account. That's the best part. And it was high time we all got together. The slogan of the show is, when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. When there isn't any boxing at all, we're still going to damn talk about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't slow us down. You can find me. Yes, I am still writing, not quite as frequently, but I am still writing about boxing at Communities Digital News, which is COM, COMM, Digi, DIGI News, comdiginews.com.
I'll go around, go to Jacob here. Jacob from Jab Hook Boxing, a semi-regular on the Wrong Real podcast for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk TV and film. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, Mike. I miss the talking boxing with you guys, and not with this whole gap in the in the current stuff, but I just want to kind of send a message out there to or shout out to Gus and Bo and for Boxing News and all the people that have come on the show before.
And shout out. Let me before I interrupt. Excuse me for interrupting. Shout out to Frances from For Boxing News, particularly the video that she posted on IG of her working out. For those who don't know, Frances, outside of her regular job, she does train and she does spar in the Midwest, and let's just say she was letting them hands go. She was throwing some impressive combinations in there. I even had to comment up to her about that. So shout out to Frances from For Boxing News.
She might want to give Shield some of that work.
I'm saying, man.
I saw that same video.
She got some quick hands. She got some quick hands, bro.
She has the. People have to remember that she's Filipino, so she loves Manny. She's trying to get that Manny hand speed down, and like all the power to her.
That's what I'm talking about.
But yeah, shout out to all those people, all the regulars, and then also all the listeners out there, all the supporters. I just want to, everybody that's on here, everybody stay safe, stay healthy. Most important thing is our friends and families, and just humans will get through this, and we're making, I'm sure, strides every day. With the science and technologies that are out there, but we'll get through this, and hopefully we'll be better on the end. Hopefully we'll treat each other better, and get kind of a new lease on life, let's say. But yeah, I can be found at Twitter at JRATM23. You can talk boxing, you can talk movies, you can talk whatever you want. I'm pretty open, but those are my two biggest topics.
And I've said it before, and I'll say it here again. If you want to, please take time to check out Jab Hook Boxing. Jacob did an excellent piece uh, at the end of 2019, at the end of last year, about one Canelo Alvarez. Excellent reading for those who want to check that out. And
Thank you.
again, thoughts and prayers to Jacob. He, like a lot of folks, have been hit by this pandemic. And you mentioned it during the show, and I hope you find some things. I hope you get back on your feet, I should say, as soon as possible.
I appreciate it. Really do. Thank you so much.
And I go to you, Daniel, last but certainly not least. Daniel from the Inscriber, for those who want to talk about the NBA, for those who want to talk about boxing or the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yes, folks, you can reach out to me at Twitter at Raucus99 or WKUZ99. Definitely, Rhodes said, trying to decipher some topics shortly because with everything that's happening, and like I said, me myself, like I said, I want to make sure. Hopefully, Jacob, hope the situation gets better, man. Like I said, I'm hanging on by a thread myself, so hopefully, like I said, your situation gets better, everybody's situation gets better, and I think I know we mentioned Anthony Yarde. I don't know if we mentioned it when I got on.
Yeah, we did.
Condolences also to the family of Nigel Benn, who also lost.
Yeah, I forgot all about that. Thanks for those who do not know Nigel Benn, former super middleweight champion, one of my favorite fighters of all time. He broke the news on Instagram that he lost his brother due to COVID-19. So thoughts and prayers and condolences to the family of one Nigel Benn. And
Absolutely.
so yeah. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk music, fitness, you know what it is, Brother JR, on Twitter at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, if you want to find out all things about Pound for Pound Box Report, blog page is the place to hit up. P4pboxreport.wordpress.com. Check the top right of the blog page. You can find links to where to find all things Pound for Pound Box Report on social media, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, where to find us on all platforms that carry RSS feeds. For those who want to stay in shape, keep on their fitness grind, Beachbody On Demand is now opening up a ton of workouts for free. Just check out my fitness page. It'll directly put you to my online coaching page. You can check out the 2-week trials that run throughout the year, and also all the other free stuff that's now opening up on Beachbody On Demand. So if you always want to check out a P90X or Shift Shop or Insanity, Pio, and all that stuff, and we want to check it out for free, the time is now to do it. So please check out my fitness page on the blog page, Pound for Pound Box Report blog page. Next episode, to be honest, I don't know, because of the state of the sport. We don't know when things will return, and subsequently don't know when we'll have a next episode of Pound for Pound Box Report, but we will have a next show, hopefully sooner than later. I want to give a shout out to Bo, the general over at Three Kings Boxing, as well as everybody over at Three Kings Boxing staff, the Lieutenant 2K, all the other writers, along with all the other writers, Big Cool, Bakari, the editor over there, Red. Give a shout out to those brothers. Shout out to Gus from Corruption and Boxing. Shout out to the homie EJ Boxing Live. Shout out to everybody in the chat. As I mentioned before, Bronze Plumber, official scorecard. Who else? Who else? And missing someone, Punch for Pound. So again, this has been episode 286 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Please take all precautions. Stay safe, or as Samuel L. Jackson said, keep your fucking ass inside. So yeah, this has been episode 286 of Pound for Pound Box Report. For Gail, for Jacob, for Daniel, I'm your host, Michael. We'll see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, folks. Please stay safe.
Stay safe indeed.